Well, this morning I am beginning I don't know how many part sermon series, to be honest with you. But I'm doing something that I've never done before. I have preached from a number of the verses in Hebrews chapter 11, very popular chapter of Scripture, known as Faith's Hall of Fame, okay? And I've preached from probably every verse in there, but I've never done a series where I went through the entire chapter at one time. And I want to do that, and I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to be referring to a couple books that I purchased just for this series. One is by Greg Laurie, World Changers, How God Uses Ordinary People to Do Extraordinary Things. And it's from, he talks about Hebrews chapter 11 in there. And then another book that's just recently come out is a book called Kingdom Heroes, Building a Strong Faith That Endures by Dr. Tony Evans. And I'll be making reference off and on to those two. They're both very, very good preachers and very, very good writers. And so, but in Dr. Tony Evans' book, Kingdom Heroes, he says this: a kingdom hero is a committed Christian who perseveres by faith in order to experience spiritual victory and divine approval. I want to read that again. I think it's pretty powerful. A kingdom hero is a committed Christian who perseveres by faith in order to experience spiritual victory and divine approval. We are going to be looking at a number of heroes of the faith in the next few weeks. But I need to say this straight up front. These people that we're going to be looking at, they were sinners just like us. Okay? They're not perfect. But as we look at Hebrews chapter 11, the emphasis in this chapter is on they are commended for their faith. They are not criticized for their failure. You will not find in Hebrews chapter 11, any of these heroes of the faith, you won't find one sin connected to their life in Hebrews chapter 11. The emphasis is on faith, their faith. They were commended for their faith. The word faith, pistis in the Greek, the word faith appears 27 times in Hebrews chapter 11 in the New International Version. A chapter of only 40 verses has 27 references to the word faith. So it's pretty obvious what the theme is of this chapter, okay? Faith. How many of you think we need to be teaching on faith in this day and age? I think it's a very key concept, faith. So let's start out with what is the nature of faith? The first thing I want to look at this morning, what is the nature of faith? What is faith? What is faith? In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "Now faith is being sure of what we hope for, and certain of what we do not see." Now, I don't know about you, but that verse always seemed to be kind of a riddle to me. It seemed to be something that was a little difficult for me to understand, okay? Being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. It's the confident assurance that what we hope for is going to happen. As we look at these Old Testament heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, they believed what God had promised them. And many of them never saw the fulfillment of that promise, but they believed that when God promised it, God's going to perform it. Okay? That was their faith. That's where it came in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it's the evidence of things we cannot yet see. Faith is all about what we cannot see. All right? I say it this way. Faith fills the gap between what we cannot see and what we must believe. Faith fills in that gap. Okay? That's what faith does. There are a lot of things that we know exist, but we can't see them. Air. Electricity. We can see the results of electricity, but we can see it in these lights, the fans. We see the results, but we don't see electricity. We don't see air, but we know that they exist. All right? David Jeremiah, in his study Bible, says, faith treats the things we hope for as a fact and places confidence today in what has been promised for the future. I like that. Confidence today for what has been promised for the future. That's faith. That's faith. Philip Yancey defines faith this way: believing in advance what will only make sense in reverse. That's faith. How many of you have had situations like that where it was a struggle to keep faith, but after that situation was over and you look back, it's like, yeah, looking back in reverse, I had that faith. I had faith. Simply put, faith is trusting God. That's as simple as I can make it. Faith is simply trusting God. It's trusting God with our whole heart, trusting Him. We use faith every single day. And a lot of times we don't even think about it, but we use faith every day. We place our trust in people and things every day. Okay? Some get on a plane. I've often wondered, is it on a plane or in a plane? I think I'd rather be in a plane than on a plane, but they always talk about on a plane. But people put their trust in pilots. Now, very few people know the pilot. You get on a plane, you're not first name basis with the pilot. You don't know who they are. But you have trust that pilot on which you get hit on his plane, he has a pilot's license. And he's got some experience flying that plane. You hope he's not just flying the plane because he stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. All right? No. Trust. A pharmacist, we place trust in pharmacists. We go to CVS, we go to Walgreens, and we get a prescription drug for whatever's ailing us, and we place our trust in that pharmacist that they have filled out that prescription correctly, and they've given us the right container for the prescription and not given us somebody else's. Okay? Trust. Doctors. Your family doctor refers you to a surgeon or a specialist for a surgery. You go into the operating room and you don't even know who this anesthesiologist is that's going to put you under. You are introduced to them that day. You don't know who they are. You put your trust that this person knows what they're doing. They're going to put me under. And then that surgeon, that specialist comes in to do the surgery, and you've been referred to him. You've never met him before. He's not your family doctor. And he's going to start cutting on you. Your surgery involves maybe a knife, and he's going to cut on you, and you're like, wow, I just was introduced to this guy, and now he's going to take a knife to me. How many of you know? Trust. You trust him. Or her, I should say, him or her. You trust them to do that surgery. Some of you, when you leave here, you might be going to the local restaurant. You place your trust in that cook that is cooking your food. Because the door is almost always closed to the kitchen, so you can't see anything. True? You don't know at what temperature they've kept your food. You don't know how they've prepared it. You don't know how they've handled it. For all you know, they could have dropped it on the floor. For all you know, the cook could have sneezed on it or coughed on it. And you don't know, but you put your trust in them. And you eat that food. Somebody say, oh, Pastor, you just spoiled it. We were going out to eat, now you just grossed me out. I think we'll eat at home. We use faith every day. You see, when you came in here this morning, you placed your faith in that chair that you're sitting on, that chair would hold you up. I didn't see anybody come in here and turn the chair over and inspect it. You just sat down. And you put your full weight on that chair. That's trust. Faith is putting your full weight on God. That's what faith is. Now, let's move on here. Verse 2, this is what the ancients were commended for. They were commended for their faith. And we're going to see that word commended come back a number of times in this chapter. These people were commended for their faith, not criticized for their failures. Keep that in mind. All right? Commended for their faith. Verse 3, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith we understand that the universe was formed. Without faith, you cannot understand the universe. All right? I want you to think that through. Without faith, you cannot understand the universe. Now, why do I say that? I say that because there's not a single one of us here today who was an eyewitness to the creation. None of us was there. None of us saw the earth being created. None of us. So the only way then that we believe that it was is by faith, because we didn't see it. There's two things in verse 3 that I want to call to your attention that are very, very important. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command. The first thing that's given to us there is the origin of the universe. The origin of the universe. The Bible says the universe came into existence by God's command. That is why there are 8 times in Genesis chapter 1 where it says, and God said. Those 3 words. And God said. God spoke the universe into existence. He spoke it. One example is literally, in the Hebrew, light be, light was. That's all he had to say. Light be, and light was. Pretty simple, isn't it? Light be, light was. He spoke it into existence. Let me break that down for you. He spoke, and light shined through the darkness. He spoke, and the waters receded from the earth. He spoke, and dry land appeared. He spoke, and vegetation appeared. He spoke, and the sun filled the sky by day, and billions of stars twinkled at night. He spoke, and the sea abounded with fish, and birds began to fly. He spoke, and cattle grazed. Squirrels gathered hickory nuts, and kangaroos began to leap throughout the outback. He spoke again, and man was created. And he spoke. There's a word that is used. By faith we understand that the universe was formed. The King James Version says was framed. Either one of those translations are fine. But it basically means, the word that's used there means to put things together in such a way which perfectly fits for an appointed purpose. He formed the universe. He specifically put things together for a specific purpose. And he said. And he said. Genesis 1:1, what does it say? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, it says, since what may be known about God is plain to them. I want you to catch that word, is plain. What can be known about God is plain. Because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. It's plain, has been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. Wow. What about that person that's never heard about God before, that's in some isolated jungle? The Bible says that person is without excuse. God has given His revelation in two ways. One is through His creation. All right? And in that, He has shown His power. He has shown His majesty. He has shown His glory in that. And that person has never heard about Christ. How can they, people say, how can they be without excuse? Because I believe this is what the Bible teaches. The person who seeks God with all their heart will always find Him. Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 13 tells us that. If you seek me with your whole heart, you're going to find me. That person that looks up in the sky and says, there's someone greater than me that created all of this. I could never have done this. There's someone a lot greater than me. There's someone a lot more powerful than me. There's someone that's a whole lot wiser than me to put this all together. And when that person begins, when they come out of their darkness into that light, God will lead them to additional light. Because if you seek me, you're going to find me. If you seek me with all your heart, you're going to find me. The second thing that that verse says, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Not only does this verse cover the origin of the universe, it covers the order. This was all put together in a perfect way for God's appointed purpose. That's why Psalm 19, 1 and 2 say, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of His hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. If you want to find God, look up in the sky. The heavens declare the glory of God. The heavens declare the glory of God. I have told people before, God has revealed Himself through the world book, His creation. And God has revealed Himself through the Word book, the Bible. And He's revealed Himself through the living Word, Jesus Christ. That's how we come to know God. 3 different ways we got a chance to come to know God, through those 3 things. God has left His fingerprints throughout all of His universe. God has never left Himself without witness. It's there. It's out there. It's out there. Well, that's the nature of faith. When we get to verse 4, we start what is a list of the names of faith. The names of faith. In the 11th chapter of Hebrews, there are 15 people that are referred to by name as examples of faith. 15 people. The first one is named Abel. Abel. Abel was the 3rd man to live on the face of the earth. The first man that ever lived obviously was Adam. The second man who ever lived was Cain. And the third man who ever lived was Abel. We don't know, Cain and Abel were brothers. We don't know how far apart they were in years. We don't know that. The Bible doesn't tell us. We just know that Cain was older than Abel. All right? But the story of Cain and Abel takes us back to Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. Hebrews 11:4 says, by faith Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith he still speaks even though he is dead. Abel. All right? We learn a little bit about Abel from Genesis chapter 4, the second part of verse 2. It says, now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. Okay? Abel was a shepherd. Cain was a farmer. Okay? In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. Well, that would be typical, wouldn't it? He's bringing an offering, and he's bringing it from what he makes his livelihood off of. He's a farmer. He's probably bringing fruit and vegetables here. Okay? But there's a key word. There's going to be a contrast between what Cain brought and what Abel is bringing. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. But on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. Abel, whenever he appears in the Scriptures, Old Testament and New Testament, there's a word that is connected to his name. The word is righteous. Righteous. Listen to Matthew 23:35. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel. That's the adjective that's always used to describe Abel. He's a righteous man. In contrast to that, Cain is mentioned 3 times in the New Testament. One is Hebrews 11:4 here. The other one is in 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. And then the last one is in the book of Jude, verse 11. Listen to what 1 John 3:12 says about Cain. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one. Wait a minute. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder his brother? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Are you starting to see this? Jude 11 talks about the way of Cain. And every time Cain is used in the New Testament, he's used as a negative example. Every time. The way of Cain. We have a term that we use today in the English language that refers to a person who is a troublemaker as someone raising Cain. In verse 8 of Genesis chapter 4, you have the first murder in human history when Cain murders his brother Abel, and it was very premeditated. Okay? I have always been told that the chief reason why God rejected Cain's offering and accepted Abel's was because Abel brought a sacrifice, Cain brought an offering. The sacrifice involved a firstborn lamb. It involved blood. And that with Cain, there was no blood in his offering. That's what I've been told. All right? After all, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. He probably brought him vegetables or fruit. He probably did. As his offering. He brought from his livelihood. I used to think that, but I don't think that way anymore. I think the reason that God rejected Cain's offering was because Cain's heart wasn't right. And his brother's was. Abel was righteous. Cain was of the evil one. Do you really think God's going to receive that offering from the heart of someone who's connected with the devil? I really believe now that if Cain's heart was right and he brought God the best that he had to bring God from his vocation of being a farmer, if his heart was right, I believe God would have accepted that. There's more going on here than what we think through. We get all wrapped up in the sacrifice. Let me read exactly how the verse says. Genesis 4:4. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. Why? Because Abel presented his offering by faith. That's what it tells us in Hebrews 11:4. By faith, Abel offered his. You don't see anything about by faith Cain offered his. He didn't have any faith. He was of the evil one. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. That's two separate things. We look at it and we connect it as one thing. That's two separate things. God accepted Abel's sacrifice because he accepted Abel. He rejected Cain. He rejected his offering because he rejected Cain, who was of the evil one. His heart wasn't right. His worship was not acceptable. Let's go on. Verse 5. The second name of faith that is mentioned here. By faith, Enoch was taken up from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. How many of you, before we're taken, either by death or the rapture, would like to be described as someone who pleased God? Amen. The background of this story of Enoch that appears in Hebrews 11:5 goes back to Genesis chapter 5, verses 21 through 24. Genesis chapter 5, verses 21 through 24. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God. By the way, there's another person that's described as walking with God in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. That's Noah. We'll look at him in 2 weeks. Then he was no more, because God took him away. For 65 years of Enoch's life, Enoch lived for Enoch. But he had a son named Methuselah. And when Methuselah was born, all of a sudden, Enoch began to walk with God for the next 300 years. It was the arrival of that baby, Methuselah, that changed Enoch's whole life. This is not unusual. I've seen it many times in ministry where men have gotten serious about their marriages. Men have gotten serious about fatherhood. They've gotten serious about their faith when there was the birth into their family of a child. And those fathers began to realize, I've got a huge responsibility now. And I need some help. So that father that maybe for a long time has drifted away and hasn't been active in church, all of a sudden they have that baby and they start coming back. I've seen it happen. That's what happened with Enoch. After that baby was born, for the next 300 years, he walked with God. He walked with God. Jude chapter 1, actually there's only one chapter in the book. Jude verses 14 and 15 tell us that Enoch was a prophet who foresaw the future judgment of God. Okay? Enoch was a prophet. Enoch's son, Methuselah, whose name means his death shall bring. That's what his name means. Methuselah. His death shall bring. Shall bring what? Methuselah lived 969 years. Just think about that. He's the oldest person that ever lived. 969 years. You've heard people talk about how old is Methuselah. Joking. The very year that Methuselah died, at the age of 969 years, the flood came that destroyed the world. His death shall bring. It was prophetical. His name was prophetical. When he dies, the flood's coming. Why? Because Enoch was a prophet who foresaw the future judgment of God. And he put that even into his son's name. The judgment is coming. The judgment is coming. He walked with God. In the New Testament, it's being referred to as walking in the Spirit. Okay? That Old Testament walked with God. You can still walk with God, but now it's the emphasis is on this walking in the Holy Spirit. Okay? Walking in the Spirit. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him away. Enoch is one of two people in the Old Testament that never died. The other one was Elijah, the prophet. The Bible tells us that Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind to heaven. There was a chariot of fire. There were horses of fire. Can you imagine that scene? Horses on fire. Chariots on fire. A whirlwind. And up Elijah goes. Enoch is described as commended as one who pleased God. That's how he's described. I was thinking about John chapter 8, verse 29, where Jesus says this, "The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him." That's quite a statement. "24 hours a day, 7 days a week," Jesus says, "I do what pleases my Father. I always do what pleases him." Wow. In a couple weeks, we're going to pick up a third name of faith, Noah. But there's a very important verse, verse 6. And I'll pick this up in a couple weeks. We've looked at the nature of faith. We've looked at the names of faith. Verse 6 gives us the necessity of faith. The necessity of faith. "And without faith it is impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists." We're going to hit that hard. "And that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." The necessity of faith is without faith, it's impossible to please God. It doesn't say it's difficult. It says it's impossible to please God without faith. The next thing we're going to look at in a couple weeks is we accept the existence of God by faith. We're going to talk about believing that God exists. Okay? Accepting the existence of God by faith. We're going to look at that in a couple weeks. All right? This is a powerful chapter of God's Word. It would probably be difficult to find too many more powerful than this chapter. Let's stand as we have a word of closing prayer this morning. In a couple weeks, we will return to this, and my sermon series the Heroes of the Faith will continue it. I won't be here next Sunday. I'm going to be out of the state, actually. One of my associate pastors at Harvester Missionary Church, you've met Pastor Bob. Next Sunday is his final Sunday. He's retiring. And they've asked me to come back for that service. And I hired him 13 years ago. He's still at that church serving. And so I get the privilege of going back to be a part of that next Sunday. And Aaron will be preaching for me. And he's going to preach, interestingly enough, from a book maybe you've never really heard a sermon from. He told me he's going to preach from the book of Jude. All right? It's only one chapter. All right? He's going to preach from that next Sunday. So let's have a word of closing prayer. Father God, I thank you for this tremendous chapter on faith. And I can't help but pray the prayer that your disciples said when they came to you. Lord, increase our faith. May we be people who please you by our faith. Father, I thank you for these examples, these illustrations of these heroes of faith that we have here in Hebrews 11. And Lord, I just pray that at this very beginning of this series of messages that you will speak to each one of us about being people of faith. It would be kind of neat someday, Lord, to be able to have you say about us, by faith, David accomplished this. By faith, this was accomplished through my people's lives. That we might be added in this same group of witnesses, this same company, with what we would consider to be some of the spiritual heavyweights. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You are dismissed.